The house is sold. You're homeless now. My son said those words without even looking me in the eye. His wife Ashley stood beside him with her arms folded, smiling like she just won the lottery. Behind them, two movers were carrying my late wife's antique dining table through the front door, the same table we'd saved for nearly 2 years to afford when Ryan was still in elementary school. For a moment, I honestly thought I'd driven to the wrong address. I looked at the porch swing I had built with my younger brother Michael 23 summers earlier. The oak tree where Ryan had hung his first treehouse was still standing. The faded blue mailbox still leaned a little to the left because I'd never gotten around to replacing the post. No, this was my house. My house, I repeated quietly. Ashley laughed. Not anymore. Ryan handed me a thick envelope. We've already signed everything. I opened it. Eviction papers, a purchase agreement, closing documents. Every page looked official. Every signature looked real. Only one thing was missing. Mine. Ashley tilted her head. You should start packing. Ryan finally met my eyes. We found a nice retirement community about 30 minutes away. I blinked. A retirement community. It's time, Dad. I looked past them toward the movers. One of them carried out my wife's sewing cabinet. Another was wrapping Michael's old fishing rods in moving blankets. That stopped me cold. Those rods weren't just fishing poles. They were the last gift my brother ever gave me. I had buried Michael 8 weeks ago. 8 weeks. This morning I'd sat across from his attorney and learned something that still hadn't completely sunk in. My younger brother had left me everything. $8.4 million. A beachfront estate outside Wilmington. Investment accounts. Several rental properties. And a family trust that changed everything. I hadn't told a soul. Not even Ryan. I wanted time to think. Time to grieve. Time to decide how to use the inheritance wisely. Instead, I came home to discover my own son had sold my house. Ashley crossed her arms. Cat got your tongue. Ryan sighed impatiently. We're trying to do what's best for everybody. Everybody. You've been living alone for years. I've been living here, I corrected. Ashley rolled her eyes. It's basically our house. I stared at her. She actually believed that. Ryan rubbed the back of his neck. You've been saying maintenance is getting harder. I said mowing the lawn isn't as easy as it used to be. Exactly. That isn't the same thing, Ashley interrupted. You should be thanking us. I couldn't help smiling. She frowned. What? You thanked yourself pretty quickly. Ryan noticed my expression. Dad. I looked at both of them. My heart hurt far more than I expected. Not because of the house, not because of the money, because I was looking at the little boy I'd once carried on my shoulders through Disney World. The teenager I'd coached through heartbreak after his first girlfriend dumped him. The young man whose college tuition I had paid by working Saturdays until my knees gave out. I hadn't raised him to become this person. Had I Ashley stepped closer? The buyers will be here in 15 minutes. I glanced toward the driveway. Sure enough. 2 unfamiliar SUVs were pulling in. A realtor climbed out carrying folders. Behind her came a smiling couple in their early 40s. They looked excited, happy, completely unaware they were walking into a disaster. The realtor waved cheerfully. Mr. Carter, Ryan waved back before I could answer. Everything's ready. No, everything wasn't ready, not even close. The realtor approached me. Congratulations on your move. I simply asked one question. Did you verify ownership before closing? She blinked. I'm sorry. The deed. Ashley answered before she could. Everything's handled. I looked directly at the realtor. Did you personally confirm who owns this property? She hesitated. Ryan shifted uncomfortably. Ashley suddenly wasn't smiling quite as much. Interesting. Maybe someone hadn't done their homework. The buyers walked onto the porch. The husband offered his hand. Beautiful place. It is, I agreed. My wife already picked out paint colors. I almost felt sorry for them. Almost. Ashley clapped her hands. Well, let's finish this. She reached for another folder. At that exact moment, my phone buzzed. I looked down. It was my attorney, Howard Jenkins. I answered calmly. Howard. His voice was steady. Daniel, I just wanted to confirm everything has officially been recorded. It has. Yes. Good timing. There was a brief pause. Something wrong. I looked around the porch. My son, my daughter-in-law, the realtor, the buyers, movers carrying my belongings into a truck. I smiled. Actually, perfect timing. Howard knew me well enough not to ask questions. I'll be there in 20 minutes. I think you'll want to. I hung up. Ashley folded her arms again. Calling a moving company. No, Ryan frowned. Who was that? My attorney. Silence. Ashley forced a laugh. For what? I looked at her, then at Ryan, then at the realtor still holding her paperwork. Finally, I spoke. You said this house is sold. It is, Ashley replied confidently. You said I'm homeless. Ryan nodded. We're sorry it had to happen this way. I smiled again. Ashley looked irritated. Why do you keep smiling? Ryan asked the same question. Dad, what's so funny? I looked him in the eye, because despite everything, despite the betrayal, despite the pain of realizing my own son thought he could throw me out of the home I'd spent 43 years paying for, I suddenly understood something. They believed they had already won. They thought the paperwork in Ryan's hands mattered. They thought the moving truck meant the story was over. They had absolutely no idea what my brother Michael had done months before he died. I took one slow breath. Then I answered. Actually, every person on that porch became silent. The house you sold belonged to my late brother's family trust. The realtor's smile disappeared. Ryan frowned. Ashley laughed nervously. What does that even mean? I slipped the envelope back into Ryan's hands. It means... I looked toward the road as a black sedan turned onto our street. Howard Jenkins had arrived. You're about to find out. Howard Jenkins stepped out of his black sedan, carrying nothing more than a slim leather briefcase. He wasn't dramatic. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. Howard had been my attorney for nearly 25 years. Before that, he'd been Michael's attorney. We had watched each other's children grow up. He attended my wife's funeral. I attended his retirement party before he decided he wasn't ready to retire after all. When he walked toward the porch, he glanced at me only once. That single look asked an important question. Are you all right? I gave him a slight nod. Not because I was all right, because I would be. Ryan looked confused. Dad, why is your lawyer here? I asked him to come, Ashley scoffed. That's unnecessary. Howard climbed the porch steps, shook my hand, then turned toward the realtor. I'm Howard Jenkins. The realtor introduced herself nervously. I'm Melissa. Howard smiled politely. I think there may be a misunderstanding. Ashley laughed. There isn't. Howard didn't respond. He simply looked at me. I'll let Daniel decide when. I nodded. Not yet. Howard understood immediately. He stepped aside without another word. Ryan frowned. What does not yet mean? It means, I said quietly, we're going to have a conversation. Ashley folded her arms tighter. I think we've talked enough. No, I looked directly at my son. I think we've barely started. Standing there on that porch, memories hit me harder than anger ever could. Ryan wasn't born into wealth. He wasn't raised with servants or private schools. He was born in a modest hospital outside Raleigh during one of the coldest January mornings I could remember. When the nurse placed him in my arms, I promised him something. You'll never wonder if your father loves you. For a long time, I kept that promise. When Ryan was 9 years old, his mother, Linda, was diagnosed with ovarian cancer. She fought for 3 years. She never complained, not once. Even during chemotherapy, she'd smile at Ryan while helping him with homework. The night before she passed away, she squeezed my hand. Don't let him grow up angry. I promised her I wouldn't. Ryan was 12 when we buried his mother. I remember standing beside that grave while snow fell across the cemetery. Ryan grabbed my hand so tightly I thought he'd break my fingers. Dad, I know. Don't leave me too. I won't. And I never did. Being a single father wasn't glamorous. It meant leaving work early for parent-teacher conferences, learning how to braid hair when Ryan volunteered at a school fundraiser, burning spaghetti, ruining laundry, driving across town because he'd forgotten his trumpet before band practice, working overtime every Saturday, skipping vacations, driving used trucks while everyone else bought new ones. Every dollar had a purpose. Ryan, college wasn't cheap. I refinanced this house twice, sold my fishing boat, postponed knee surgery, worked through pain because tuition bills didn't wait. When Ryan graduated from NC State, I cried harder than he did. He hugged me. We did it. No, you did it. That was what fathers believed. Your children's victories mattered more than your own. A year later, Ryan met Ashley. At first, I liked her. She was smart, organized, ambitious. She worked in marketing and always seemed to have a 5-year plan. She laughed easily, called me Mr. Carter, brought sweet tea whenever she visited. Michael wasn't convinced. One afternoon, he leaned against my truck after Ashley left. You trust her too quickly. I laughed. You're suspicious of everybody. Not everybody. Then why her? Michael shrugged. She watches people before she talks. So she isn't trying to understand them. What is she doing? Calculating. I told him he watched too many crime shows. He let it go. Now, standing on my porch 20 years later, I wished I'd listened. Ryan and Ashley married 6 months before COVID changed everything. When the pandemic hit, Ryan lost his management job. Ashley began working remotely. Money became tight. One evening, Ryan sat at my kitchen table. Dad, you need something. He smiled sheepishly. Just for a little while. What? Could we stay here until things stabilize? Of course. He looked relieved. Ashley hugged me. You've saved us. I meant it when I answered. That's what family does. At first, everything worked beautifully. Ashley cooked dinner. Ryan mowed the lawn. Movie nights every Friday. Coffee together every Sunday morning. The house felt alive again. Then, little things started changing. Ashley rearranged furniture without asking. The guest room became their office. Family photos disappeared from shelves. She repainted the dining room while I was visiting Michael. When I returned, Linda's favorite wallpaper was gone. I thought it needed updating, Ashley explained. She never asked. She simply decided. Ryan always defended her. It's just paint, Dad. Maybe, but homes aren't built from paint. They're built from memories. Months turned into years. Ashley started referring to my bedroom as the downstairs suite. The garage became Ryan's workshop. The backyard became our property. I noticed. I simply chose peace over confrontation. Michael noticed too. He visited often after retiring from commercial aviation. Unlike me, he said exactly what he thought. One afternoon, Ashley announced she wanted to remove Linda's rose garden. It wastes space. Michael nearly dropped his coffee. Linda had planted those roses herself during the year Ryan was born. I quietly said, no. Ashley smiled. Then did it anyway while I was attending a veterans charity event. Ryan apologized, but he never replanted them. That hurt more than losing the flowers. About 2 years before Michael died, he asked me an unusual question. If something happened to me, I interrupted. Nothing's happening. He smiled. Humor me. Fine. What would Ryan do if someone placed a fortune in front of him? I laughed. He'd probably panic. Michael didn't laugh. I hope you're right. At the time, I didn't understand why he'd asked. Now, everything made sense. Michael had seen cracks in my family long before I admitted they existed. He never tried turning me against Ryan. He simply paid attention. 8 weeks ago, cancer finally took Michael. The strongest man I'd ever known was gone within 6 months of his diagnosis. During those final days, he squeezed my hand. Don't confuse kindness with surrender. I didn't understand then. This morning, Howard finally explained why Michael had smiled when signing the last of his estate documents. My brother hadn't simply left me money. He'd left me protection. Protection from the very betrayal now standing on my front porch. As I looked at Ryan, I realized something painful. The boy I'd raised still existed somewhere inside the man before me. But over the years, greed had learned to speak louder than gratitude, and someone had been whispering in his ear the entire time. Ashley. I wasn't ready to expose everything. Not yet. But I knew one thing with absolute certainty. The next few minutes were about to change every one of our lives forever. No one spoke. The only sound came from the movers loading another box into the truck. Howard stood quietly beside me, his briefcase resting against his leg. Ryan looked back and forth between us. Dad, what family trust? Ashley forced a laugh. This is ridiculous. She looked at the realtor. Melissa, tell them we're done here. Melissa didn't answer. Instead, she looked at Howard. Sir, are you saying there's an issue with the title? Howard remained perfectly calm. I'm saying we should verify who had the legal authority to sell this property. Ashley shook her head. We already did. Howard smiled politely. Excellent. He opened his briefcase and removed a thin blue folder. Then this should be very easy to clear up. The buyers exchanged nervous glances. The husband lowered the folder he'd been holding. I'm sorry. He looked at Melissa. Is there actually a problem? Melissa swallowed. I don't know yet. Howard handed her a single document. Would you mind reading the owner's name aloud? She glanced down. Her expression changed immediately. Ashley noticed. What? Melissa looked at the page again, as though hoping it would magically change. It says, she hesitated. It says the property is owned by the Carter Family Coastal Trust. Ashley frowned. So, Howard answered. Who is listed as trustee? Melissa looked again. Daniel Carter. Howard nodded. And does the trust authorize Ryan Carter or Ashley Carter to sell this property? She kept reading. A few seconds passed. No, Ryan stepped forward. Wait, what do you mean no? Melissa looked genuinely shaken. It specifically states that only the trustee can approve any sale. Ryan pointed at me. My dad lives here. Howard nodded. Correct. So what's the problem? The problem, Howard said gently, is that living somewhere and owning it are not the same thing. Ashley laughed again. Only this time. It sounded forced. This has to be some paperwork mistake. Howard calmly handed her another document. It isn't. She snatched it from his hand. Her eyes scanned the first page, then the second, then the signature page. Color slowly disappeared from her face. What? She flipped through the pages faster. What is this? My late brother's trust agreement. You made this up. No, Howard answered before I could. It was executed nearly 3 years ago. Ryan stared at me. You knew I did. You never told me. No, why? I looked at him for a long moment. Because it wasn't your business. The words hit him harder than I expected. Growing up, I'd always told Ryan everything. When money was tight, he knew. When I refinanced the house, he knew. When I planned to retire, he knew. I'd never hidden anything important from him, until now. Not because I wanted secrets, because Michael had asked me not to. About 18 months before he died, Michael invited Howard and me to lunch overlooking Wrightsville Beach. He looked healthier than he actually was. His cancer hadn't been diagnosed yet. He spread several documents across the table. I've been thinking. Howard smiled. You've always been dangerous when you say that. Michael ignored him. I want everything protected. I frowned. Protected from what? He looked at me. People change when money appears. I laughed. Our family's different. He didn't smile. I hope so. Then he asked Howard to explain. Howard outlined the trust. Michael would transfer every major asset into it while he was still alive. If something happened to him, everything would pass directly into the trust. Not through probate delays, not through confusion, not through relatives making claims. The trustee would have complete legal authority. Michael looked at me. I want that trustee to be you. I immediately refused. No, you have to. I'm not comfortable. I don't care. He smiled. I trust you more than anyone. I finally agreed, mostly because I never imagined I'd actually need to use it. Now, standing on my front porch, I realized my brother had been preparing for a day like this all along. Ashley slammed the papers shut. This proves nothing. Howard remained patient. It proves ownership. It doesn't. It does. Ryan rubbed his temples. Dad, when did the house go into this trust? 2 years ago. So, he stopped talking. I could actually see him trying to understand. If the trust owns the house, it does. Then, he looked toward the realtor. I couldn't sell it. Melissa answered quietly. No. Ashley stepped forward. We had power of attorney. Howard turned toward her. For Daniel's checking account. Ashley froze. He continued. Power of attorney for routine financial matters does not transfer ownership of real estate. She didn't respond. Because she couldn't. Howard already knew exactly what documents she'd signed years earlier. He had drafted them himself after my knee replacement surgery. Limited authority, nothing more. Ashley had assumed those papers gave her far more control than they actually did. A very expensive assumption. The husband who planned to buy my house looked sick. He turned to Melissa. We've already wired the money. She nodded weakly. I know. His wife crossed her arms. So where's our money now? Nobody answered. The silence became uncomfortable. Finally, Howard spoke. The funds should remain in escrow until ownership is resolved. Melissa nodded. Yes. Ashley looked confused. What does escrow have to do with this? Howard answered. It means no one owns this house except the trust. Ryan slowly turned toward Ashley. You told me everything was legal. It is. It doesn't sound legal, she snapped. Because your father is playing games. No, I finally spoke. I stayed quiet. Same thing. No, I looked directly at her. The difference is that silence isn't deception. One of the movers walked onto the porch carrying a large cardboard box. Where do you want this? He looked at Ashley. She opened her mouth. Howard interrupted politely. I'd recommend putting everything back exactly where you found it. The mover frowned. What? The property owner has not authorized removal. The man immediately lowered the box. I'm not getting involved. He turned around and carried it back inside. A second mover noticed. So, he whispered, we unloading everything? I would. The first mover nodded. Within moments, furniture that had already been loaded into the truck started coming back into my house. Ashley watched in disbelief. Don't touch those, the foreman shook his head. Ma'am, I'm not risking my company over disputed ownership. Ryan's face turned pale. This can't be happening. Then things became even worse. A sheriff's deputy pulled into the driveway, not because anyone had been arrested. The buyers had requested an officer after realizing a property dispute was unfolding. The deputy approached calmly. Afternoon, Howard greeted him. Officer. The deputy looked around. Can someone explain what's going on? Howard handed him copies of the trust documents. The deputy read quietly for nearly a minute. Finally, he looked at Ryan. Sir, did you sign documents claiming authority to sell this property? Ryan nodded slowly. I thought I had authority. The deputy asked another question. Did you verify ownership before signing? Ryan looked at Ashley. She wouldn't meet his eyes. For the first time since I'd arrived home, my son looked frightened. Not angry, not defensive, frightened. Because he was beginning to understand something neither of them had considered. They hadn't simply embarrassed themselves. They might have created legal problems far bigger than a failed home sale. And for the first time that afternoon, Ryan stopped looking at me. He started looking at Ashley, as if seeing her for the very first time. The sheriff's deputy wasn't interested in assigning blame. Not yet. He was interested in keeping everyone calm. Nobody's under arrest, he said evenly. But until ownership is confirmed, no one is removing another item from this property. The movers immediately stopped working. The buyers stepped back onto the lawn. Melissa, the realtor, looked like she wanted to disappear. Ashley was the first to protest. This is ridiculous. We have a signed purchase agreement. Howard nodded politely. You do? So why are we standing here? Because a purchase agreement doesn't magically transfer ownership from someone who never had the legal authority to sell. Ashley clenched her jaw. Ryan still hadn't said a word. He simply stared at the trust documents in the deputy's hands. The deputy suggested everyone move inside to avoid creating a scene for the neighbors. Too late. Mrs. Henderson from across the street was already standing on her porch pretending to water flowers that clearly didn't need watering. Two teenage boys had stopped riding their bikes and were watching from the corner. Within another 10 minutes, 3 more neighbors had wandered outside. Small neighborhoods work that way, especially after lunchtime. Howard leaned toward me. Would you rather continue this privately? I looked around the living room. Linda's photographs were still hanging on the wall. Michael's fishing rods had been returned to the corner where they belonged. Everything looked almost normal. Almost. No, I answered quietly. Let's finish it. Melissa sat at my dining room table with both hands wrapped around a glass of water. I don't understand. Howard slid another folder toward her. You ordered a title search. Yes. Who requested it? She looked embarrassed. A title company hired by the buyers. And what information were they given? She hesitated. They were told Ryan Carter represented the owner. Howard nodded. Did anyone contact Daniel Carter? No. Did anyone request identification from the trustee? No. Did anyone ask for trust documents? Melissa closed her eyes. No. Howard wasn't trying to humiliate her. He simply wanted every fact on the table. I've practiced real estate law for 38 years, he said gently. The first rule is simple. Verify ownership. Melissa whispered, I know. No. Howard shook his head. You assumed ownership. There was a difference, a costly one. The buyers weren't angry with me. If anything, they looked sympathetic. The husband extended his hand. I'm sorry this happened. So am I. We honestly thought everything was legitimate. I believe you. His wife sighed. We've already sold our condo. Howard reassured them. The funds remain protected. She nodded. I know, but our children start school in 3 weeks. For the first time all afternoon, I realized they were victims too. They hadn't tried stealing anything. They trusted professionals, and now they were caught in someone else's greed. I looked at Howard. Help them however you can. He smiled. I already planned to. Ryan finally spoke. Dad. His voice sounded smaller than I'd ever heard. I didn't know. Ashley immediately interrupted. Don't start blaming yourself. Ryan ignored her. He looked directly at me. I honestly believed, he struggled to finish, that the house would eventually become mine. I answered honestly. One day it probably would have. The room became silent. Ryan blinked. What? If you had simply waited. Ashley spun toward him. Don't listen to that. I continued anyway. I spent 43 years paying for this house. I wanted it to stay in the family. Ryan looked stunned. You never told me. You never asked. Ashley slammed her purse onto the table. This is emotional manipulation. Howard calmly looked at her. No, he kept information private. That's legal. You tricked us. No. Howard folded his hands. The trust existed long before today's events. Ashley laughed bitterly. Convenient. Howard reached into his briefcase again. I expected that response. He removed certified copies bearing county recording stamps. Every page carried official dates, official signatures, official seals recorded nearly 2 years earlier, long before anyone discussed selling my house. Ashley flipped through them frantically. This, she stopped. This can't, she looked at Ryan. I didn't know. Ryan finally asked the question that had been growing inside him since Howard arrived. Did you check any of this? Ashley hesitated. Did you? I trusted what I was told. By who she didn't answer, because there wasn't anyone. She hadn't trusted information, she had trusted assumptions, and she'd convinced Ryan to do the same. Howard quietly excused himself to answer a phone call. While he stepped outside, Ryan walked over to one of Linda's family photographs. It showed the three of us standing on Carolina Beach when he was about 8 years old. He picked it up. I remember this. So do I. I caught that tiny fish. You insisted it was a shark. For the first time all afternoon, Ryan smiled, only for a second. Then he looked around the room. His eyes stopped on the empty spot where Linda's rose garden used to be outside the window. I should have replanted those. I didn't answer, because we both knew he wasn't talking only about flowers. Howard returned carrying fresh news. I just spoke with the title company. Melissa looked up immediately. They're suspending the transaction. She nodded. I expected that. The buyer's funds remain frozen. The husband sighed with relief. Thank goodness. Howard wasn't finished. The company has also opened an internal investigation. Melissa looked devastated. I understand. No, Howard looked directly at her. This isn't necessarily about misconduct. It's about procedure. She nodded slowly. I skipped steps. You trusted representations without verifying ownership. Yes. I won't make that mistake again. I believed her. Then Howard turned toward Ryan. I need to ask you something. Ryan nodded. When Ashley presented these documents for your signature, did you read every page? Ryan looked embarrassed. No. Why not? I trusted my wife. Howard nodded thoughtfully. Trust is valuable. He paused. But responsibility can't be delegated. Ryan lowered his head. Those words seemed to hit him harder than anything else Howard had said, because they were true. Ashley suddenly stood. I'm done listening to this. She grabbed her purse. We're leaving. Ryan didn't move. Ryan. Nothing. Ryan, he looked at her slowly. Did you ever verify anything? She stared at him. You don't believe me now. I'm asking a simple question. She crossed her arms. You believe your father over your own wife? He answered with a sentence that changed the room. I don't know what to believe anymore. Ashley looked genuinely shocked. For years, she'd answered every question before Ryan could. Finished his sentences, made decisions, explained situations. Today, for the first time, he was thinking for himself, and she had no answer for that. I watched my son carefully. The anger was fading. Confusion had taken its place. Confusion often hurts more than anger, because confusion forces people to question the stories they've been telling themselves. As everyone prepared to leave, Howard quietly handed me another folder. This came from Michael. I frowned. What is it? A sealed letter. He instructed me not to give it to you unless your family ever tried to take advantage of your kindness. I stared at the envelope in my hands. On the front, in Michael's familiar handwriting, were just 6 words. For Danny, when the truth arrives. I had a feeling whatever was inside would explain far more than the trust ever could. After everyone left the house became quiet again. Not peaceful, just quiet. There's a difference. Peace is something you feel. Silence is simply the absence of noise. I stood alone in the living room holding the envelope Michael had left behind. For Danny, when the truth arrives. I ran my thumb across his familiar handwriting before carefully opening it. Inside was a 3-page letter. I sat in Linda's old recliner, the chair she used every evening while reading mystery novels, and began reading. Dear Danny, if you're reading this, it means something I prayed would never happen has finally happened. Your kindness has been mistaken for weakness. I stopped. Michael knew me better than anyone. He always joked that I had 2 flaws. I trusted too easily, and I forgave too quickly. I kept reading. I've watched Ryan change over this past several years. Not all at once, little by little. I don't believe he's a bad man. I believe he's become comfortable letting someone else do his thinking. That's far more dangerous. I swallowed hard. That sentence echoed inside my head. Someone else doing his thinking. Ashley. Michael continued, if greed has reached your front door, don't answer it with revenge. Answer it with truth. Truth lasts longer. I smiled through tears. That sounded exactly like him. The last page contained one final request. If Ryan ever truly understands what he's done, give him the chance I never had. People deserve consequences. Sometimes, they also deserve another opportunity. I folded the letter carefully. My younger brother had somehow managed to give me advice after he was gone. That was Michael, always looking after me. The following weeks became a whirlwind of meetings. Howard handled most of the legal work. The buyers officially withdrew from the sale. Fortunately, the escrow account protected every dollar they had transferred. Their money was returned. They thanked me several times, even though none of it had been my fault. Melissa, the realtor, visited Howard's office voluntarily. She admitted every shortcut she'd taken. The state licensing board required additional ethics training and placed a formal warning on her record. She accepted it without complaint. I earned this, she told Howard. I forgot that paperwork represents real people's lives. I respected her for saying that. She made mistakes. Unlike some people, she owned them. Ryan and Ashley, however, that was different. Howard uncovered dozens of emails exchanged between Ashley and the real estate agent. Nothing criminal, but revealing. One message read, "Daniel doesn't understand business. We'll explain everything after closing." Another said, "Once the sale is finished, he'll have no choice but to move." Reading those words hurt more than I'd expected. Not because Ashley wrote them, because Ryan had been copied on every email. He never objected, never replied, never defended me. His silence had become agreement. About a month later, Ryan called. I let it ring. He called again, then again. Finally, I answered. "Dad." "Yes." His voice cracked immediately. "I need to see you." "I don't think that's a good idea." "Please." There was something different about him. Gone was the confidence. Gone was the entitlement. All I heard was exhaustion. "Tomorrow," I said. 10 o'clock. "I'll be there." The next morning, Ryan arrived alone. No Ashley. No expensive SUV. No designer sunglasses. He drove an older pickup truck I'd never seen before. When he stepped onto the porch, he looked 10 years older. Dark circles hung beneath his eyes. His beard had grown unevenly. He'd lost weight. I invited him inside. Neither of us spoke for almost a full minute. Finally, he looked around the living room. "I forgot how quiet this house is." "It wasn't always." "No," he smiled sadly. "It wasn't." He noticed Linda's photograph on the mantel. "I've been thinking about Mom." "So have I. I keep wondering." He stopped. "What would she think of me?" I answered honestly. "She'd still love you." He looked relieved for a second. Then I continued. "She'd also be deeply disappointed." His eyes filled with tears. "I know." Ryan reached into his jacket and placed a thick envelope on the coffee table. "What is this?" "Every key." I looked inside. House keys, garage keys, storage unit keys, the spare mailbox key, even the old brass key to my workshop. "I should have given these back years ago." I nodded. "You should have." Then came the words I'd never expected to hear. "I filed for divorce." I looked up. It was my decision. He rubbed his hands together nervously. I finally started reading things. "What things?" "Everything. The contracts, our bank accounts, emails, text messages." He laughed bitterly. "I've spent years signing papers without reading them." I remembered Howard's words. Responsibility can't be delegated. Ryan had finally learned that lesson. The hard way. I blamed Ashley. He stared at the floor. "But that's only part of the truth." I remained silent. I wanted to believe her. Why? Because it was easier. Easier than what? Easier than admitting I'd become selfish. That was the first completely honest thing he'd said in years. He looked at me. "I convinced myself you owed me." "You never said that." "I didn't have to." He wiped away a tear. "I acted like you did." For several minutes we simply sat there. Father, son, separated by years of small choices, not one giant betrayal, thousands of little ones. "I keep remembering college." He smiled faintly. "You worked every Saturday." "I remember. I thought everybody's dad did that." I laughed softly. "No, I know that now." He covered his face with both hands. "I never thanked you. You were busy living your life." "That's not an excuse." "No, it isn't." He looked around the room again. "I destroyed this family." I shook my head. "No." "What do you mean?" "Families aren't destroyed in a single afternoon. They're weakened one compromise at a time." He nodded slowly. "I guess I started compromising a long time ago." Before leaving, Ryan handed me one more envelope. "What is this?" "My resignation." I frowned. "From what?" "The company Ashley and I started. I don't want money built on shortcuts anymore." He smiled weakly. "I got a job." "Doing what? Maintenance?" "At a county parks department." I couldn't help smiling. "Full time?" He nodded. "It isn't glamorous." "It doesn't have to be. It pays less than half of what I used to make. And I sleep better." For the first time in months, I believed him. After Ryan left, I walked to the beach just before sunset. The ocean looked exactly as it had the day Michael and I skipped school 55 years earlier. Waves don't care about inheritances. They don't care about lawsuits or trust funds or greed. They simply keep returning to shore. I sat on an old driftwood log and unfolded Michael's letter one more time. His final sentence caught my eye. Never let justice turn your heart into stone. I watched the sun disappear below the horizon. The legal battle was over. The property was safe. My brother's wishes had been honored, but the hardest decision still remained. Not whether Ryan deserved forgiveness, whether I was willing to help him earn it. That answer would change both of our lives. The morning after my walk on this beach, I called Howard. I've made my decision. He didn't ask what it was. He simply said, "Come by the office." Howard had known me long enough to recognize the difference between an emotional reaction and a carefully considered choice. By the time I arrived, he already had a yellow legal pad waiting on the conference table. "So," he said, adjusting his glasses, "what would Michael tell you to do?" I smiled. "Probably something that would make both of us uncomfortable." Howard chuckled. "That sounds like him." I slid Michael's letter across the table. "I've read this 6 times. And I've realized something." Howard waited. "I've spent weeks asking whether Ryan deserves another chance." He nodded. "But that's the wrong question. What is the right one?" I looked out the window before answering. "Has he become the kind of man who understands why he needs one?" Howard smiled. "Now you're thinking like your brother." A week later, I invited Ryan to meet me at the beachfront estate Michael had left behind. He had never been there. Neither had Ashley. Michael kept that place private, not because he wanted to hide it, because it was where he went to think. The house overlooked the Atlantic Ocean just north of Wrightsville Beach. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't one of those enormous mansions people imagine when they hear the words beachfront estate. It was elegant, comfortable, built to last. Exactly the kind of place Michael loved. Ryan stood on the back deck staring at the water. "I had no idea Uncle Michael owned this." "Most people didn't." He looked at me. "You could live here forever." "I probably will." He nodded quietly. "I hope you do." There wasn't a trace of envy in his voice. 6 months earlier, he would have been calculating its value. Now, he simply admired the view. That mattered. We sat outside with 2 cups of coffee. The ocean breeze carried the smell of salt water through the porch. Neither of us rushed the conversation. Finally, Ryan broke the silence. "I don't expect anything." "I know. I don't expect money." "I know. I don't expect the house." "I know." He looked down. "I just hope one day you'll trust me enough to answer my phone calls." That sentence hit harder than any apology, because it wasn't about inheritance. It was about relationship. I reached into my jacket and handed him a folded sheet of paper. He opened it carefully. "What is this, my conditions?" He looked confused. "For what?" "For rebuilding our family." He read each line slowly. "You will continue living independently. You will never receive ownership of property simply because you're my son. If one day I choose to leave you anything, it will be because you've earned my trust, not because you expect it." He nodded after every sentence. Then he reached the final page. "Volunteer twice each month with the county senior housing program." He looked up. "Why?" "Because I want you to meet people whose children never visit." His eyes softened. "I will. I know you will. And counseling, you'll continue." "I already scheduled 6 more sessions." I smiled. "Good." Over the following year, Ryan kept every promise. Not once did he ask about money. Not once did he ask about the trust. Instead, he called every Sunday afternoon. Sometimes we talked for an hour. Sometimes only 5 minutes. Neither mattered. Consistency mattered. One Saturday, he invited me to join him at the senior housing center where he volunteered. I watched him repair broken porch railings for elderly residents, replace smoke detector batteries, carry groceries. One gentleman in his 80s asked if Ryan was my son. Before I could answer, Ryan smiled. "I hope I'm becoming someone he's proud to call his son again." I had to look away for a moment, because my eyes suddenly weren't cooperating. Melissa visited the house one afternoon nearly a year after everything happened. She brought homemade peach cobbler. "I figured I owed you dessert." I laughed. "You never owed me anything." She smiled. "I wanted you to know." She hesitated. "I changed how I practice." "What do you mean?" I verify everything, she laughed. Twice. I'm glad. She looked around the living room. One mistake almost destroyed 3 families. I nodded. But you learned. I did. That's what matters. Several months later, I received an unexpected letter. It was from the couple who had nearly bought my house. Inside was a Christmas card. They'd found another home, a better one according to them. At the bottom they had written, "Sometimes the worst day of your life quietly becomes the day that protects you." I placed the card beside Michael's letter. Both belonged together. Ryan's divorce became final the following spring. He never spoke badly about Ashley. Neither did I. Bitterness has a way of living longer than the people who create it. I wasn't interested in carrying it. One afternoon, Ryan asked me something. "Dad?" "Yes." "Do you think Ashley ever loved me?" I thought carefully before answering. "I think that's a question only she can answer." He nodded. "I guess you're right." Then I added something Michael once told me. Love without honesty eventually becomes possession. Ryan sat quietly for a long time. "I'll remember that." On the 2nd anniversary of Michael's passing, our family gathered at the beachfront estate. Not a large gathering, just the people who truly wanted to be there. My sister, a few nieces and nephews, Howard, Ryan. After dinner, Ryan stood up holding a glass of iced tea. "I want to say something." Everyone became quiet. He looked at me. "I spent years believing inheritance meant receiving something." He smiled through tears. I was wrong. He glanced toward the ocean. "My father inherited money." Then he looked back at me. "But I inherited something much more valuable. A second chance." Nobody applauded. Nobody needed to. Some moments are too honest for applause. That evening after everyone left, I walked onto the beach alone. The waves rolled in exactly as they always had. Steady, patient, unconcerned with human mistakes. I thought about Linda, about Michael, about the years I nearly lost with my son. Money had never been the real inheritance. The trust hadn't saved my family. Truth had. Truth had exposed our weaknesses. Grace had given us the opportunity to heal them. As I locked the front door that night, I realized Michael had left me far more than $8.4 million. He had left me the wisdom to protect my heart without closing it. And that may have been the greatest inheritance of all. If this story reminded you that trust is precious, forgiveness takes courage, and love should never be confused with entitlement, I hope you'll share it with someone who might need to hear it. And if you enjoy heartfelt stories about family, justice, and second chances, I'd be honored if you subscribed and joined me for the next one.